Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. Can people make positive changes in their life that really last? Dr. Mark W. Baker has been trying to answer this question for the past 25 years as a clinical psychologist. To discover the answer, he went on a quest to find people who have changed their lives in the most dramatic ways, ending up in the largest maximum security prison in the United States, located in Angola, Louisiana. Once the most brutal prison in the country, Angola was transformed into one of the most effective sites for rehabilitation in the United States. He uses stories from inside Angola, along with his decades of experience as a clinical psychologist, to share with readers the amazing human potential for change and personal growth. Drawing on themes of forgiveness, community, justice, hope, and spirituality, shows all of us how to change our lives for the better, no matter who we are or what we've done. Dr. Mark W. Baker has received his PhD in clinical psychology and master's degree in theology, as well as a certificate in psychodynamic psychotherapy. He serves as the executive director of the LeVie Counseling Centers in Pasadena and Santa Monica, California. He's the author of several books, including Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lived, which has sold more than 2 million copies, and is the author of Overcoming Shame, Let Go of Others' Expectation, Embrace second Friday of every month at the 12 o'clock hour. Here to discuss his new book, You Can Change, Stories from Angola Prison and the Psychology of Personal Transformation, is my dear friend, my safe person, and guest for this hour of talking about overcoming shame, Dr. Mark Baker. And I hope you share my best wishes for just a fabulous new year for you as you and I gracefully age along the way. We've been doing this for a number of years together, and we just keep getting whiter and whiter. I actually refer to it as metallic blonde.
There you go, metallic blonde. That's the only way to gain wisdom, is by aging, so I accept it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You know, we have spent a great deal of time together, many hours together, talking about shame. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about the struggle so many people have, and it's really the center of our sin responses, is steeped in shame as we respond. But we've entered a season in America, unlike any season that I remember in my 68 years of life, where shame is the weapon of choice in the political arena, in the media, in polarizing communities, people groups, cities, states, diverse populations are literally using this WMD, this weapon of mass destruction, to shame people, trying to have them change their response through intimidation.
Right.
Shame, intimidation.
It's a terrible problem, and I've thought much about this. I actually wrote my book on shame because I kept experiencing this in my consultation room as I'm working with people and their problems, depression, anxiety, narcissism, whatever kinds of psychological problems people would bring to me. When I peel back the layers of the defenses, I would come to this core of a shame response that creates insecurity just so often at the core of mental illness for us. Is this shame response. It's a spiritual problem. At our deepest level, we end up having a spiritual problem that needs to be dealt with. So then I write my book on shame because I feel like this is such a core issue for all of us, whether we're saved or not. We still struggle with this issue because we're still human beings in this world. And then I've taken a step back and look at more of a macro level is, why is this going on? Why are people, just as you said, taking this very thing that is such a problem for us and then weaponizing it as we attempt to get other people to change? I'm going to shame you, and that should motivate you to change. And it doesn't work. It so backfires. Like, look at our society today. We're so polarized as we attempt to shame each other into change. It does not produce agreement. It does not produce self-awareness. It does not produce change. It only produces defensiveness and anger and the belief that you're a victim. The belief that you're a victim, so then you need to victimize other. There's no one more vicious than a victim who feels entitled to respond out of a victim posture. And it's become a cultural problem now in our society. And so now I'm interested in understanding, how did we get here? What is going on? We've got this dysfunctional way of responding to hurt in our lives. And I work a lot with academia because I have a large counseling center. So I have students who come from graduate schools around the Los Angeles area, and larger. Actually, they come from all over to our counseling center. And so that's where I'm looking with my microscope, is what's going on in academia that's producing this, or it's contributing to this. It's not just in academia, but they're doing a lot of damage in teaching our students that they're victims, that they're powerless, that the way they should resolve hurt feelings is to shame and take a victim posture, which believes I don't have power. It's a violation of everything we believe as Christians, that I have access to the greatest power in the universe to empower me to confront problems and deal with them honestly and vulnerably. I can come to you and resolve my issues because I have the power of God to facilitate our resolution of our conflict, right? But if you teach students in graduate school that they are victims, that they cannot address problems, they need safe spaces because they don't have the power to address problems in their lives, then you're violating, I believe, our very ontology. You're teaching them to be in the world. Even as Christians, Christian schools are teaching their students they don't know how to be in the world and access the power of God to resolve conflicts in the world. And it's to me mind blowing when
Well, I want to read you a text interchange I had at 8:08 this morning. One of my board members, I'm grandpa to his kids. I've been through all their life cycles with them. I've been since the youngest was in the womb. I've been with this family and my dearest friends here. And I had interviewed one of the former Harlem Globetrotters yesterday. And his son is, my board member and friend's son, oldest son, is a golfer. He's an athlete, and he's very, very, very good. He's just 15 years old. He's got like a 3 handicap. He's got a very, very bright future. And I asked how he was doing. I sent the devotional to him because it was an athlete's devotional. And so I asked if he had gotten it, and he said, yeah, but he's been moody since Monday. One of his teachers is driving him nuts, so he's going to the principal today. And I said, that's good. He's got a very keen sense of right and wrong. I remember how upset he was at the youth pastor's choice of worldly words and not feeling that that was a good example. And he says she's a first-year teacher and is trying to be an authority by demeaning the students just in his class, an honors class. He doesn't think she should call them stupid and assign more work to just their class because she doesn't like them, which she has told his class multiple times. That's exactly what we're talking about. This is as of 2.5 hours ago. I'm having this dialogue about this precious, godly 15-year-old kid who's in high school, and he has a new first-year teacher, and she is shaming them, demeaning them, tearing them down, as opposed to being what, my password, you always have a choice of security questions, right? 68 years old. What was the name of your first grade teacher? Right? Well, I remember sweet, little, precious Mrs. Pollard. Remember?
There you go. Right. You don't forget that.
Stuck with me for over 60 years. And that's always one of the options in that drop-down box. Well, young people, it's easy for them to remember. But us older guys, but it stuck with me. Somebody who was kind and edifying and encouraging. That name stuck with me all my life. But to look at this kind of operation and it's unbiblical, first of all.
It is. It's a denial of how we are made. We are made by God to seek out a loving relationship with an authority. That's our ontology. We're all looking for that. We may not know it, but we're all looking for a loving relationship with an authority that's greater than us. And that's our drive in life, to seek that out. Now, when authority figures take a shaming posture towards us, that's the opposite of what we're looking for. And we'll get to this, but I in our prison system, we think, well, these criminals are narcissistic, right? They're taking things that are there, taking lives, taking property. So how are we going to fix narcissism? We got to bring them down a notch. That's this teacher's attitude towards their students. You people are all narcissistic, little selfish kids. I'm going to take you down a notch. That's how I'm going to help you be better people. It's such a wrong thinking. What we now know in psychology is shame is not the cure for narcissism. It's the cause of narcissism. And if you're shaming students who might be narcissistic, so there might be narcissistic students in that class. Maybe that's what she's so mad about, right? She's taking the exact wrong approach to dealing with narcissism. To bring them down a notch just angers them, makes them dislike her, and makes them want to act out more. And that's what we found in our prison system, when we thought, well, we're just going to take these guys down a notch. We're going to punish them and shame them and treat them like animals. And then they'll learn that when they get out, they got to be appropriate in society. It doesn't work. It just makes them angry. And when they get out, they're worse criminals than when they went in. We've got it backwards. We've got it backwards in our society.
You know, it's so interesting that in the book early on, you talk about this wrongly named organization that oversees our prison system, the Department of Corrections.
Right.
And you know, as I'm reading this, it literally jumped off the page at me, and I began to think about our conversations. I told you the 5 years I devoted to studying psychology, while I had no degree aspirations whatsoever. So I liked the professor, and so I stayed with him all the way through. I liked the sociology professor, I stayed with him all the way through. Philosophy professor, I stayed with him all the way through. Political science, stayed with him all the way through. It had 160 college credits, but I couldn't get a degree because I only had 5 courses I ever took all the way through every semester of college, till they try to figure out, well, how are we going to get you out of here? You've been here long enough. It's time for you to go. So we figured out a Bachelor of Science in Education, and we found a way to make it work. But it just jumped off the page at me, because I don't think, I mean, it's just, we've always heard of the Department of Corrections. But in light of psychology, in light of shame and looking to affect a desire for change, because if there's no desire for change, it's only external. It's just going through, it's pleasing the master, making the warden and the guard happy, and doing whatever I have to do to get by, to pose, to perpetuate the fraud.
Right.
That's what I'm going to do. So you have this penal system. And you think about that whole thing. A system of correction and punishment to penalize you for what you did, and then we're going to correct you by getting you to conform. We're going to break your will, right? Which I've never seen a prison where everybody's sitting in the corner sucking their thumb.
Nope, it doesn't work. It doesn't produce transformation. We're not transforming. We're not correcting. There's no rehabilitation. If your goal is to break someone, they're only going to be obedient as long as the threat of punishment is right there. So there has to be a cop standing on the corner in order for a criminal who comes out of that system to want to behave. If the cop isn't standing on the corner, he's not going to behave. That system doesn't work. There's no internalization of new values that causes true rehabilitation. And so our prison system has it's the worst in the world. We incarcerate more people than any other country on the planet, and we do that in a far greater rate than any other country on the planet. And our crime rate is no better than any other country on the planet. And with violent crimes, it's worse. So somebody needs to take a look at this and say, "What? I don't think we're doing this right. I don't think our fundamental approach to rehabilitation is right." And the core of it, what I found is, as we're saying, shame. That the system is built on domination and shame, and that if we can dominate and shame others, we'll change them and change their behavior. And it's what we try to do to ourselves. It's what New Year's resolutions are all about. There's people all over the country right now trying to shame themselves into less weight, into better behavior, and they never last. I think the studies are 3 months tops. Those are the best of us who keep our New Year's resolutions. Because trying to shame yourself into better behavior doesn't work. We're not made that way. We're not made to feel that I'm unworthy unless I perform in the right way. That doesn't produce lasting change. Short term, it does. If the cop is standing on the corner, I'm not going to act out because I don't want to get shot. But that's very short term. I'm not any different if you try to shame me into obedience and teach me that I'm powerless. I just had this happen. We have students come to our counseling center. Had a new student come, and she's from a Christian school, and we're going to train her to become we do the practical part where we train them to do therapy. And she was uncomfortable with some things that were happening, so she went back to her school and complained and said, "I'm uncomfortable if this or that is happening." I've never had a conversation with her. She dealt with the other supervisors, and because she's brand new, I've never even had a one-on-one conversation with her. The school immediately took the stance of, "We're removing all of our students from your training program." There was no conversation. There was no let's get together. There's no Matthew 18. I think we need to sit down and talk about offending parties and see if we can discuss this together. None of it. It's that you're powerless to resolve this. You're uncomfortable. That must not be a safe place. We're pulling all of our students out of your training center. What are we teaching our students in academia? That they're unable to resolve conflict, that there is no power of God available to them to go to others and say, "Hey, I've been hurt," or "Hey, I'm uncomfortable," or "Hey, I didn't like what you said. Let's sit down and talk about this." And if that doesn't work, you bring someone with you. Let's follow the Matthew 18 pattern. We're teaching them that no, that's not possible for us. And then that bleeds out into our society, where they're feeling, I don't have the ability. There's something defective and weak about me, and I need to be protected, rather than someone who needs to speak up and believe that God will protect me as I go into the battle of life and deal with these conflicts. There's something culturally wrong with the shift in our country. Now, let me just say this. This is not my area of expertise, but I started reading because I'm very curious about this. What is going on? And there are those who've been saying this for a couple of decades now. Christopher Lash and Jonathan Haidt and now Joseph Bottom. The readers have been saying, we've lost the core of our identity as an American culture. 50 years ago, we went to church. 50 years ago, we went to temple. 50 years ago, we had a common shared value system. There was a way of conducting ourselves in our society that paralleled the development of America. There were these Judeo-Christian beliefs that are the backbone of our culture. We don't believe those things anymore. The men and women in their 20s now, if you ask them what their religious affiliation is, the number one growing category is none. They're actually called nuns because that's the growing sense of their spiritual identity. They'll say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. They'll say, yeah, I believe in a higher power or a concept of God, but religion itself and those Judeo-Christian values that go along with religion, those are antiquated. And I think we all need to look at this. We're drifting away from a core set of values that guides us as a culture, and we're moving in a direction that, to me, I think is I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the direction in which we're going.
Scripturally, we know that there is no condemnation in Messiah. It's right there in the Word of God.
Right.
No condemnation. But yet, I don't think that the body is immune in this world of condemnation. I cannot believe that our Democratic-controlled Congress, our House, does not have Christians in that party who are using this weapon of shame, condemnation, accusation, stigmatization. We're being stigmatized by names. I'm now a homophobe, I'm a xenophobe, I'm a Islamophobe, I'm being labeled racist. I'm being labeled with all these things which are, having lived through what you and I have lived through in our lifetimes, are quite insulting.
Right.
They're quite demeaning. And
Right.
there is no, and if you watch the news interaction, if you have a member of this new wave in an interview setting and there's some dissenting positions, there is no decorum, there is no order, there's no respect. They will shout them down, they
Right.
will talk over them, they
Right.
are not open to receiving any differing opinion, and they will drive to compliance, conformity, and subjection. And it is a ideal that says that I am right and you
Yes.
are wrong.
Right.
There is no room in there for honest dialogue and discourse. And this is what's eroding that core that you and I look at, which is community, which, if you break the word down, the anatomy of the word, the etymology of the word, common unity brings community. And that's what that's all about. And we no longer have a common unity. We have
Right.
no sense of common unity. It's this far past Copernicus being a rebel and dying, ashamed scientist, to even think about the fact that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. Today, this Copernican says, I am the center of the universe.
Right. Right.
And everything revolves around me.
I think you're right. I think what's happened is we have a new wave of religious fundamentalists, and they believe the content of what you just said. That's their religion. And so they believe it with the fervor that the people that persecuted Copernicus believed what they believed. The world is flat, or the earth is the center of the universe. And we believe this so much that we will literally burn you at the stake if you disagree with this. That's how firmly we believe it. They are now those people. They just don't know that. They view themselves as enlightened, or Joseph Bottom calls them the elite. But they're elite, not economically, they're elite in that spiritually they know better than you and I. If you and I believe in old traditional values, then we're just not evolved. And they hold these, and they have content of their religion, the things you just mentioned. I was reading a paper presented by an expert in the area of transsexuals and transgender, because this is a big subject now. This is one of the issues of this new religion.
Right.
And this guy's been studying this for 30 years. And his colleague was presenting a paper at a psychological conference, just presenting his research on transsexuals and transgender, and just saying, well, here's the data. This is what we now know. And I'm interested. I want, what are the data? I'm interested in. And a psychologist in that academic meeting stood up and started screaming at him, not allowing him to finish presenting his data because they didn't like the implications of the data. What is going on in our culture today? We're screaming at each other because we're uncomfortable with the data. And this is just, these are not Christians, right? These are just, he's just presenting his data, and if I'm uncomfortable with it, you're a bad person. And you deserve to be shouted down because I'm uncomfortable with what you're saying. We've got a new religion of fundamentalists on our hands, and they're approaching disagreements with this kind of anger and this kind of rejection and this kind of need to crucify those who disagree with us. That to me is a serious concern for us. And as we've been saying, they use shame as their weapon. It's not you're wrong, you're bad, and I'm going to shame you.
You know, it's very interesting. I had this conversation the other day, was interviewing someone, and we were talking about creation, and I said, oddly enough, Of course, I'm a creationist. Of course, I'm the literal 6-day, Old Testament, all my life. I said, but spiritually, I happen to agree with Darwin. I happen to believe that there is a spiritual evolution, that the non-believer, the completely biblically illiterate, is primordial ooze. They're a single-cell amoeba, and that you go through this evolutionary process to come to faith and then grow in your faith till you become a full human being. So I do believe in spiritual Darwinism, which is kind of maybe a term you've never heard before. Maybe I made it up in this crazy mind of mine that thinks like that, that says that, okay, maybe he was onto something, but he just didn't know what he was onto. I don't agree with anything that he said in the natural, but in the spiritual, I absolutely do see a complete evolution of, in my 24 years of faith. I was a single cell primordial ooze that came into being when I said yes to the Lord. That was my first complex decision as a thinking organism. And then as I was fed and developed and grew and evolved into someone that had an authority and a command of the text and of the understanding of the depth of it. So I actually believe in spiritual Darwinism. It's kind of an odd concept, but one that we see. So when we take a look at these individuals that have no relationship with God, that don't believe in this higher power, in this transcendent God that is one God, not many gods, and not myself as a God, and I'm an image bearer, but that doesn't make me a lower G God. It doesn't make me God at all. It makes me man. That's all it makes me. That's all it is I'm a man created in the image of God. But the pride and the arrogance and the superiority of one person diminishing, and this is what this person did, was diminishing the contribution and the value of not even an opinion, statistical data. I'm presenting you with numbers of a sampling of 10,000. These are the results of the sampling of 10, and you have an emotional response to fact, means that you've lost a grasp of reality, of empirical data that has no slant to it whatsoever, unless it was done under the scientific method where I proved, all I ever did was prove to my hypothesis. Which we see a lot of research which is slanted, or you left out this and you left out this because only this supports your hypothesis. So, in that case, I might I won't yell at him, but I'll certainly pull him off the side and say,
you would have questions,
but that's the way you do it.
Of course, and there's a lot of that too. In this particular area, gender studies department does a lot of that. There's a lot of proving what I already knew was true. But you can see that's kind of where this conflict came from. But what you're saying that I think is right is that we have a new level of religious fervor, just as we had with Copernicus. But they don't see that they're the ones persecuting science. They don't see that they're the ones who have religiously fundamentalist ideas, and they have content in their religion, the things we're talking about. That's the content. It's not a personal relationship with God. That's not part of their content. And it's not even the belief that you and I are made in the image of God, and therefore it's incumbent upon us to hold to certain values because we are image bearers. I think that may be one of the most important concepts in the Bible, is that we're made in the image of God. So there are values that we have and can know and can live by. That's not a part of this new religion. And so I think there's an insecurity that comes with creating a false God and a false religion that's not based on a relationship with the one and the true God that is personal and can be personally known. And with that insecurity then comes the need for weaponry, and now we see the need for shame. I've got to put you down because I don't feel secure in what I believe.
until I had a relationship with God, I was incapable of having a relationship with myself. This is the key to peace. This is the key to understanding. This is the key to self-examination. It's the key to looking in the mirror and being able to assess, this is wrong thinking. You're heading down the wrong. Having a relationship with yourself is the foundation. But God's got to be the one. I have to have an image in which I have as my not my Adonis, not my picture of perfection, but my Messiah, who is not in the natural perfect. There was nothing about him that they esteemed. It wasn't pretty. Most of us aren't in our line. We have features that the world doesn't find too attractive. We're the subject of many of a cartoon character. But the reality is that we have something, a target, something to press onto. And I can measure against how I'm doing as I run that race. And that's incredibly important for me to have a healthy relationship with myself without condemning myself, but challenging myself to do better. Because I know that when I put my head on the bed, I'm going to wake up as a different person. I'm chemically changed. I'm physically changed. I've lost some hairs. I've grown some new ones. Some cells have died. I'm not the same person I was when I went to bed. And the psychological transactions that take place in the spiritual realm while I'm in this state of unconsciousness, my body doesn't shut down. My autonomic nervous system doesn't shut down, and there's activity. And it's in dreams and thoughts and all kinds of things going on, reshaping, reforming, revealing, doing all those things that it does, and I wake up and I'm different. Right. And I've had a download, either a good download, a bad download, bad pizza, encounter with God, don't know. You have to sort through that. We're talking with Dr. Mark Baker, whose passion as a psychologist is, over the years, has been honed down to a very laser focus on a core of almost every manifestation of a psychological disorder. And it's called shame. It's at the core of confusion, personality, anxiety, anger, narcissism. We've explored this extensively on this program to try to understand the relationship we're supposed to have with each other in the body, and then outside the body, to be welcoming in and to understand why people do what they do and how we respond to it, and are we equipped to respond to it. But he's gone on a journey to find out and answer the question, can people really change? Now that's a fundamental thesis, doctrinal thesis. To answer the question, can people affect long-term, lasting, and effective positive change going from this end of the spectrum to this end of the spectrum and staying there and finding a new identity and no longer being attached, no longer, as we most of us do, take that old identity and drag it into the new with us to where it will show up periodically. It will visit us periodically. But can there be lasting change? And he found the answers in the most extraordinary place, in the most extraordinary environment, with the most extraordinary people. They are the outcast, the downcast, the career criminals, the murderers, the rapists, the truly the worst of humanity, and yet lasting change, transformational change, took place when there was a dramatic shift in the environment in which they operated. You've got to stay tuned to hear the rest of this story with Dr. Mark Baker, author of the new book, You Can Change, and the stories from Angola Prison and the psychology of personal transformation. Not clinical, straight clinical psychology, but psychology combined with the Word of God. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and as we do on the second Friday of every month at the 12 o'clock hour, when we have the segment with Dr. Mark Baker on overcoming shame in some form or fashion, the shame continuum is being explored in his very direct book called Overcoming Shame. But now at the very heart of this new book, just coming out, you can order it. It is one of the most stunning reads and stories of transformation. And you, my audience, know that I read 700 books a year, and very few of them do I highlight. Very few of them do I tag and bookmark. Very few. But this is one of them. And I'm not finished yet. That's the exciting part, is that this is the first time in our 4 years of being on the air that I have ever gone into an interview where I have not finished the book yet. And so this is going to be an ongoing dialogue as we traverse this book for some time to come, because I'm just, it's astounding. So, Mark, welcome back, and take us to the very genesis
Yeah.
of this story, because it's fascinating to me.
It's actually interesting. I started the pilgrimage towards writing this book 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I had just finished 2 books that had been very successful. I had written Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lived, was the first in the series of books I was writing, and that one sold over 2 million copies. I then wrote Spiritual Wisdom for a Happier Life, which has sold about 800,000 copies now worldwide. And so I felt like, okay, there's something going on here that needs to be addressed spiritually in our world today. People are hungry for a healthier life from a spiritual perspective, because all of my books are talking about how what Jesus has to say about psychological health. That's all my books are. And I'm surprised that people in villages in Brazil want to know about this. I mean, it's that universal for us to put these things together. So I thought I need to think prayerfully about my next book. What is it that I should write about next? And I didn't know, and so I didn't get an answer. So I called a good friend of mine, Pastor Scott Weimer, who's the pastor of a large church in Atlanta. Been friends for many, many years, and I just asked him to pray for me. I said, just pray for me. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. And he said, I will. And within a week, I was led to watch this documentary film called The Farm. And it's a documentary about a hospice program going on at the largest maximum security prison in America. These 6,200 prisoners there are serving life sentences. 90% of them will die there because they're the worst of the worst people on the planet. They're there for murder, rape, armed robbery. They're there for crimes for which society doesn't want them back in society. Society is deemed, you can't change, you need to be locked up, we're not going to ever let you out and be with the common folk again. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. That means that if they're not going to get out, that means they're going to die there. So what do they do? Well, the prisoners themselves formed a hospice program to take care of the dying prisoners, because 80% of the prisoners, when they go to Angola, no one ever comes to see them again. No, none of the children want to go see their dad who was a murderer. Right. None of the wives want to go see a dad who was a rapist. You know, they abandoned them there. So these prisoners had to care for each other and care them right to death. They even have a burial site there on the prison grounds, because the majority of the ones that die there, no one comes to claim the body. So I was so moved by these prisoners who were caring and washing and feeding and helping these men. It's a men's prison, die, and I needed to know what could cause these criminals who were sociopaths to transform into caring individuals to care for these people. I knew what I needed to find out. I was inspired, and I believe it came from my friend's prayer that led me to that. And so I started a letter writing campaign to figure out where this prison was, who's running the prison, what's going on there, how is this possible, how can these vicious narcissistic criminals who completely lack empathy become the most empathic people I've ever seen. And the documentary showed it quite clearly. It wasn't easy, but I found one of the wardens who would respond to me, and I kept writing her and finally got permission to go there. And what I found out was amazing. Angola was known to be the bloodiest prison in America. They would have 40 murders a year there because they sent the worst of the worst people there. It originally was a plantation. The reason Angola is it's a city, but it's just the prison there. And the reason it's called Angola is because it was a slave plantation long before the Civil War. And the slaves there, most of the slaves there were from Angola in Africa. That's where they were transported to. So they just called it Angola. It was like Little Angola. They had this plantation there where they would work slaves to death. And when after the Civil War, they had all these freed slaves in the area without skills. The crime rate went through the roof, and so they needed to create a prison to deal now with the new crime wave that they had. Because now that they're free and they don't have skills, they were into stealing and doing all kinds of bad things. And so then they started then in Louisiana, which has the toughest laws in the country, I found out. They're run by the Napoleonic Code, and it's a whole different justice system. And if you commit a crime in Angola, they're tough on you. They've got the toughest sentencing policies in the country, and it's been that way since that time. And so they created a prison in that same site to deal with the criminals there, and they worked the prison just as they had done the plantation before. They would just work the prisoners to death. And it's 18,000 acres, so they created crops there, and they had cattle there, and they would just, if anyone committed a crime, they sent them to Angola, and they worked you literally to death. They would drop dead as they produced and sold whatever it is the prisoners would make, which created just a horrible atmosphere there. So up until 1995, movies were made about this place, Dead Man Walking, Monsters Ball. There are all kinds of movies that have been made about the horrible conditions in this prison because they had the worst of the worst there, and they were policing them as all the other prisons in our country were policing them. They were going to beat them and shame them into obedience. The term penitentiary came from the idea that we're going to take criminals and we're going to lock them away and punish them until they're penitent, until they're sorry for what they did, and once they are, we'll let them back out into society. And of course, we all know the recidivism rate is well over 65%. So 2/3 of the ones we let out just go right back to crime. So we're not transforming anybody. We're not rehabilitating anybody. We're shaming and beating and humiliating them into obedience while they're in prison. But let them out, what do you think they're going to do? There's no change. There's no internal change that's happened. Well, in 1995, God performed a miracle. He sent Burl Cain to Angola. Burl Cain had been a warden at another prison. Burl Cain is a Christian, and Burl Cain believed that people can change. Burl Cain believed he was called to this prison where the wardens just turned over and turned over and turned over because they weren't changing anything. It was still just a brutal, awful atmosphere. And what he did, Burl said to me, and I went and met him and talked to him about this transformation that I saw. And he said, it wasn't me. I just opened up the gates and let God in. That was his explanation. Because when I got there, when I got to this prison, what I saw was a peaceful atmosphere. I walked around the prison without any prison guards. There were women walking around in the prison. Women staff could walk around in the main yard without so much as a cat call. I didn't feel any sense of threat at all. The warden and I walked around for days in the prison with no guards. I never saw a gun. I'm sure they were there, but I didn't see them. And inmates would come up to us and talk to us and have a question, and they would plead their case with the warden. And if he felt like they had a good record for a period of time, he would adjudicate it on the spot and say, okay, I'm going to give you this privilege or that privilege. It was amazing. I had conversations with these guys, and by the end of my last visit, I was there several times. It's very large, 18,000 acres is as big as Manhattan Island. So I had to take a car and drive it to the different encampments. They had different encampments that were spread all over this vast area. I was on my own. They just said, okay, why don't you go over to Camp A or go over to Camp D and go ahead and talk to that guy. I think you'll find that guy interesting. Get in my car, I drive over there. I walk up to the gate and I say, I'm here to see Joe. And they would let him out of his cell. It was completely safe. I never felt the threat of anything. I never saw anyone even swear. One of the warden's principles are you treat people with respect and they'll act with respect. And if a guard swears at an inmate, he gets fired. This is the culture that he changed. He brought in not shaming, not punishment, not an attempt to humiliate people into submission until they're penitent, but brought in a a God-informed view of people, to treat people as God would want you to treat people. And what did I see? Genuine transformation. I saw guys who were free to walk around the prison, free to meet with me on their own. They did not dress in orange jumpsuits. The warden believes that's humiliating, so don't do it. They dressed in clothes just like you and I wear. If you treat people with respect, what do you know? They dig deep. They dig deep to find respect. Now, I have to say this. My son said this when one of my trips, I was going to Angola. He says, "Oh, you're going to that prison where the warden's nice to people." And I said, "Well, no, that's not quite right, because our perspective is that that we treat people with respect, but we set boundaries too. That if men act in an appropriate way, then they get rewards for that. If they don't, then they get punished for that. But there are logical consequences for their punishment. Their punishment is swift, and it's for specific behavior. That I believe you can change. I believe you can do better. And if you do not measure up to the standards of our community, there are consequences for that. You can be locked in solitary confinement if you hurt someone." And so they learned that a good father does punish and reward both, but treats with respect.
I think one of the most stunning things early on in the book that just jumped off the page was that they were treating narcissistic people with narcissistic tools. That the narcissist takes everything that you have because they think they deserve it more than you do. So if you respond to it with a narcissistic system where you take everything away from them, all their privileges, all their identity, all their character, all their uniqueness, everything, and you try to strip them down to conform, and you take that, then you're using narcissism as the antidote for narcissism. And that defines all this stripping away. We're going to put you. This was Hitler. His biggest failure was the tattoo. The single biggest thing at Auschwitz was that you kept us without food. We were shrinking down to barely a shadow, and you made us all the same.
Right.
Except for one problem. Everybody had a different number. And therefore, the thing that defied the conformity was the fact that he was such a meticulous record keeper that he gave them an individual number. And I know countless stories that it was the number, the fact that I was still unique. I hadn't lost my identity because I have a different number than you. And so he used the stripping away, the same way our penal system strips you away. You're not going to wear our clothes. You're going to eat when we tell you to eat. What we say to, you're going to do what we say to do. You're going to do it our way. And that's the narcissistic, the antidote for narcissism. It's like, they give you they'll make anti-venom from venom, but they don't give you venom for venom. They give you a hybridization incorporating the defense. They take it to they take the toxicity out of it and treat you with, and so that's what the antithesis of narcissism is. It's a restoration as opposed to a taking away. It's taking the same paradigm and it's dialing it down to where it's now it's an antidote. It's not fighting fire with fire. You're extinguishing fire by not robbing it of oxygen, but convincing the fire that you don't want to burn anymore. You're better off not burning because the burning is self-destructive.
Right.
Where our current penal system is we douse you with gasoline and we light you on fire. And
exactly the wrong system. I love that example, because if I have a different number, then I have value. I have uniqueness and value, right? I still have value. I'm an image bearer if I have a number. And this is the warden's perspective. What cures narcissism? Grace. That you have value. Now, if you act according to your value, you have rewards and freedom, and there's all kinds of accomplishments that I talk about in the book that are rewards for you being who God intended you to be. But if you don't act in congruence with who God intended you to be, there are consequences for that in life and also in prison.
Amen.
So it's not that he's nice; he's fair, and he demonstrates grace. But grace also brings with it consequence for failure to live up to who God created you to be.
And isn't that what Hebrews tells us, is that no discipline feels good at the time.
Exactly.
Nobody likes it.
Exactly.
Oh, please, it hurts so good.
Yeah.
That's a whole different world than the biblical world.
Right.
We've been talking with Dr. Mark Baker, as we do on the second Friday of every month at 12 o'clock hour, talking about the core issue of shame and how we can affect change in the life of those who operate from a core system fed by the poison of shame. He's released a brand new book called You Can Change: Stories from Angola Prison and the Psychology of Personal Transformation. Yes, it's transformation in God, with God as the transformer and God as the arbiter of a better covenant relationship that brings peace, the Prince of Peace. And that was Mark Baker's observation of this maximum security, career, life sentence felon who lived in an economy of peace and demonstrated lasting change. We'll continue this dialogue next month when Dr. Baker is back with us. But in the meantime, go to our website, click on Dr. Mark W. Baker's name, and this book will come up, and you can go ahead and order it right now. It's an amazing, fascinating story about the transformational power of God through His representatives on earth, and that is us, those who are in Messiah, to bring a message of love, of grace, of restoration and healing and kindness to one another will bring about lasting change. Dr. Mark Baker, always, always, always.
Always good, Eric. Good to be with you.
Great to be with you. God bless you. Happy New Year to you. And we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.